SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Prototype software developed to manage data from the Square Kilometre Array telescope project is now being tested on the world's second fastest supercomputer in China. Once installed on the SKA, the complete system will process raw observations from distant stars and galaxies and turn them into data that can be studied by astronomers around the world. Professor Andreas Wesenek from the University of Western Australia's arm of the International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research says the Square Kilometre Array science data processor will be the brain of the new radio telescope now being built in outback Australia and southern Africa. The successful deployment of the prototype science data processor execution framework on the Tianhe 2 supercomputer provides the control and monitoring environment to execute millions of tasks, consuming and producing millions of data items on many thousands of individual computers. This is important because it represents the scale of computer processing required for every single Square Kilometre Array observation obtained every 6 to 12 hours. Wesenek says the novel execution framework on the science data processor is data activated, meaning individual data items are wrapped in an active piece of software that automatically triggers the applications needed to process it. Whenever a data item's ready, it triggers the next task. The prototype was initially run on 500 compute nodes at the supercomputer and then extended to 1,000 nodes. The next step will be to ramp up the number of individual items being deployed and then increase the number of compute nodes to around 8,500. The system's already running 66,000 items, and the next stage will be to increase that to several million. The plan involves eventually running 50 to 60 million items on between 8,500 and 10,000 nodes. Located in China's Ganzhou, Tianhe 2 has some 16,000 computer nodes and can perform quadrillions of calculations every second. In fact, until surpassed this year, it was the world's fastest supercomputer from June 2013 until June 2016. The Square Kilometre Array is one of the world's largest science projects, with the low-frequency part of the telescope alone set to have more than 250,000 antennas facing the sky. Wesenek says each of the 2 Square Kilometre Array observatories will produce enough data to fill a typical laptop hard drive every second.
We'll have a dedicated, on-purpose built computing facility on site, on both sides, actually in South Africa and in Western Australia. And they are doing essentially add and multiply very simple things, and that's FPGA-based machines. And that stage, the data is even much more than what we are receiving for the processing. Now, after that stage, the data is going onto a wide area network. In both cases, about 800 kilometers network down to dedicated compute centers, and that's mostly high-performance compute facilities and common off-the-shelf hardware. That's what we are planning, at least, or at least mostly common off-the-shelf hardware. And what we are getting through the network in both cases, South Africa and Western Australia, will be about 1 terabyte a second. That means a typical hard drive on a laptop right now would be filled within 1 second. So that's probably explaining best what scale of magnitude we have to deal with. And that's a wide area network as well.
The astronomers who are going to be sifting through that data, that's going to be too much for any team to go through. There've got to be ways of working out through some automated process what you keep and what you throw away.
Yeah, that's correct. So actually at that stage, nobody will actually look at the data directly because it's simply too much. So that's where the SK is very different. And for that matter, the Australian Square Kilometre Pathfinder, the ASCAP telescope, is very similar. So the data from that Pathfinder is already so big that we have to process it straight away in an automatic fashion. And the SK is even more so. So what we are really planning to do is take that data, which up to now is actually dealt with directly by astronomers in current-day telescopes, and turn it around and produce higher-level data products out of that, which are much smaller than and easier to handle. So the plan is to have essentially no people really interacting with the data directly, but only the automated systems and computers, and then have only a few quality checkpoints which tell us whether the data is any good or whether the reduction went correctly.
And then from there it goes to the astronomers to actually work out what they're seeing and what that means for their theories.
Exactly.
Tell me about the work your team has been doing with what was once the fastest computer in the world, now still the second fastest. Might point out at this stage China has, I think, about 5 of the 10 fastest computers in the world at the moment.
Yep, so they are quite active in that area, and it's quite an opportunity to actually be able to tap on those resources, which are quite a bit away from many of the next ones. The first one is now close to 100 petaflops. The second one is still on a 50 petaflop scale, so it's huge resources we can actually use there.
Perfect example of Moore's law.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the top 500 list, we're actually on a kind of a flat plateau the last 4.5 years with the system we had been using now, and that brought us underneath the logarithmic scale which Moore's law is actually giving us. But with the new system, we're exactly on top that line again. You can see it there straight away.
And we've got atomic hard drives still to come. That's being worked on now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tell me about the research that you've been involved in.
What we are responsible for inside the so-called science data processor work package of the Square Kilometre Array is what's called the data layer. And the data layer is essentially everything which deals with managing the data from the point when we receive it from the wide area network, from the two sites, throughout the life cycle of the data when it's being distributed to astronomers. So this is really about data management, data life cycle management, and the controlling the processing. We are not too much involved in the processing algorithms themselves. That's kind of modules in our system, but we have been working a lot on getting a framework in place where we can actually execute those algorithms.
And the computer you're using got 16,000 computer nodes?
Yes, a really big one, and for the time being we haven't even used a large fraction, but that's the next stage. So we are planning on using up to 10,000 or even more of those nodes.
And this is really the sort of level we have to be looking at in order to process all this information that the SKA, both in Australia and South Africa, will be providing.
Yes, each of those facilities in Cape Town at the end of the day and in Perth will be of about that order of magnitude in size. And order of magnitude in size means number of nodes, because at the time when we are building those computers, of course, they are much more powerful. So we'll take advantage of Moore's law again and use essentially the same number of nodes, but with a lot more power in the back. The framework we have actually been working on is very flexible. So what we can do is not just run it on these very, very big computers. We actually run it on a single computer as well. And moreover, we also run it on the cloud. So we can actually export that whole thing into things on Amazon Web Services, on similar cloud infrastructures. And that gives us the ability to support our astronomy community even better than just by supporting the main infrastructure of the SKA.
That's Professor Andreas Wesenek from the University of Western Australia's arm of the International Centre for Radio Astronomy Research.